Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. I'm an employment law and business law attorney, and I host this live weekly talk radio show and this live weekly video broadcast every Tuesday night from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Talk Radio NYC, where I have guests who discuss some of the most novel, interesting, and compelling issues that employers and business owners are facing during these trying times. And in that regard, in the spirit of my show, our goal and our purpose, I'm very pleased tonight to introduce and to welcome our guest, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah. Rita, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. And you're on mute, by the way. I just wanted to let you know. Oh.
Lovely to be here, Eric. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Really glad that you can make it to the show tonight. Quite an impressive background, which I'm going to share with our audience in just a moment. First, I want to give our audience tonight, our listeners, a sense of what our topic is. And our topic really, I think, is an important one that really affects business owners, employers, and employees alike. And that is empowering women in the workforce. And Rita and I were talking about this before the show, the fact that too many smart, talented women who left the workforce to raise children are unable to find jobs that match their credentials and lifestyle commitments when they try to return. Not enough is being done to retain and retrain or re-engage this fundamental talent pool. Companies that once hired and trained these incredible women now suffer from an intense loss of headcount and a huge drain of hiring and training resources as well. So on tonight's episode, join me and my guest, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, CEO and founder of UMA, to discuss how we can challenge the status quo and break the mold and work with like-minded employers to create opportunities that match the credentials and lifestyle goals of these powerful women. So learn why applying DEI and strategic initiatives can benefit both the female workforce and the companies who employ them. And with that topic in mind, I can't think of a better, more qualified guest tonight than our guest this evening, as I mentioned, folks, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, who helms UMA, an international platform empowering confidence, success, and resilience in women and minorities. Now, Rita started her career in finance at Goldman Sachs International, and after a decade at the firm, she went on to lead global business development in the pharmaceutical industry. Rita is a distinguished alumna of King's College London, serving also on the advisory council of King's Business School, and was also awarded a Doctorate of Humanities, HC, from Commonwealth University. She is an advisor and mentor to many organizations, policy forums, and academic institutions around the world, and a sought-after international speaker. We're glad you can be with us as well tonight, and thought leader on topics such as gender equality, diversity and inclusion, and youth and women empowerment. Now, Rita has won multiple awards and recognitions, most recently as an honoree of the President's Lifetime Achievement Award from U.S. President Joe Biden and Mahatma Gandhi Samman Award presented at the Houses of Parliament in London. Dr. Kakati-Shah is also the best-selling author of The Goddess of Go-Getting, Your Guide to Confidence, Leadership, and Workplace Success, and has co-authored books on women in business, the UN's SDG 5, diversity and inclusion. Wow, so that's quite an impressive background. You certainly must be pretty engaged and busy, I imagine, with that kind of pedigree.
No, thank you for that really, really kind introduction.
Sure.
And that summary there. Yeah, no, I really came to do what I do. It's almost like serendipitous moments, Eric. I like to say that everything that's happened in life is for a reason. And it started off, with my background, and just one thing led to another, and sort of here I am.
Yeah. Well, that kind of is a nice segue, Rita, to my very first question, which is to tell us a bit more about yourself. Mainly, like, how did your career initially start out, and then what prompted you to become an advocate for female empowerment and inclusion, and to found the company UMA?
That's a great question. So really, if I go back to my background that you mentioned, I was in finance for 10 years. And certainly when I started, I was on the trading floor of the equities trading floor doing pan-European sales trading. So, and at the time, I was one of very, very few women on the floor totally, and certainly the only woman on my team at the time. So I guess I fell into what we now call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, just by virtue of being who I was. You know, it wasn't a thing back then. This was in the early 2000s. There was no actual official term that we use for it now. But I just found that, I was always a very social person. I love getting people together. I'm always very much into learning, meeting people, and trying to build my, my presence within the firm, but also help others too. And they're just natural questions. Like, I knew that there were other women at the firm. I trained with them on the training program. I was in the London office, but we came to New York for the training program. But then on the floor, I thought, where are these amazing women, and how can we network more and find out what we're doing, and sort of, rotate like you did when you were first interning, training for the job. That sort of stopped when you joined full time. So just asking those natural questions of how do we reconnect this incredible talent pool is how I really fell into that space, getting people together, helping people feel valued. What I've always said about the whole meaning of what DEI is all about is really that sense of belonging. How do you feel connected? How do you feel that sense of value? How do you feel like you belong? And that's really what it's all about, and with the different facets and the different sort of nuances of DEI. So that's sort of how I initially, I guess, fell into it. How I started UMA, fast forward a few years, and I was in the pharmaceutical industry in business development. I've always loved to travel, Eric. And those travels took me here, there, and everywhere, meeting key opinion leaders, thought leaders in across psychiatry and neurology. And that's how I ended up in New York, and settled down, got married, now have two children. They're now 7 and 9. But when I was pregnant for my son, and I had just a conversation with my at the time boss about, I didn't want to necessarily take time off or anything like that. I just didn't know what I wanted. I was a to-be mom, I was just a corporate person. And we had the conversation about, what's the plan? What do we do? There was none. He said, well, you could take 6 weeks off, unpaid, of course, and you have to file a disability claim to do that. So it felt like a bit of a slap in the cheek, really, hearing that. But that's really what led me to think, okay, well, what does this actually mean? And compare the US, where I was, to the UK, where I came from, where you can actually get up to a year of paid leave and then come back and sort of rejoin where you left off. So it's because of that I actually left that job, raised my children for 3.5, 4 years. During that time, realized that, wow, this is by far the toughest career I've ever held, full stop. The full-time job of motherhood taught me so much, but so much of what it taught me was particularly that there were certain skills that are really imperative to the paid salaried workforce that I didn't learn in the paid salaried workforce. Things like communication, negotiation. You become such a hard hitter at these when you're actually a parent, a full-time parent.
Oh, yes.
This is really what led me to really help UMA, that planted the seeds of what am I going to do to kind of empower this new talent pool. I was part of that talent pool there and then, living this every single day, thinking, what is this disconnect between me now having an incredibly enhanced skill set and the workforce not necessarily recognizing that. So that's really how I started UMA.
Wow, it's interesting, Rita. I find that, well, first of all, thank you for sharing all that with us. Tonight, it really gives some context and some I guess, background to what you do and why you do it. I find that a lot of people, when I ask that question, like, tell us more about yourself, what motivated you, prompted you to found your own, fill in the blank, firm, company, what have you. It's often either something they saw through family growing up, or it's a personal experience they had that shaped them. And I definitely hear a lot of that personal experience. You talked about like being in finance, recognizing that there are other women, other female employees, other people who are women and minorities or both. And then, of course, how do you get them to connect and come to the table and be recognized and included and acknowledged? And then, of course, so I can see how your personal experience sounds like really informed this interest, but then you combine, being a mom, an expectant mom, and being told about the, unfortunately, at times very, the dearth of good paid family leave. And I know this is an employment law attorney, that different states have different laws. Some states like Florida don't require any kind of leave to be given, for maternity leave or expectant mothers or when they deliver. Other states have paid leave, but it's very short-lived, or 12 weeks unpaid. So I can see how, like you 20 years ago, or maybe not 20, but 8 and 10 years ago, if you're age of your children, will run into some issues there, and to think, this is something like very telling about the workforce and how we value or don't value women, right? Because it's usually the women that are taking this time off. Men aren't taking time off to give birth, right? Like, I'm a father of a 3-year-old son, but my wife clearly did the heavy lifting in the regard to carrying and delivering, giving birth to our wonderful son. Anyway, but I hear you on that. And then just, what you kind of were saying about like the skills that women have being a mom, being a parent. And I want to come back to that in a later question, because I think it's an interesting issue that a lot of employers, I think, they don't look at, these skills that stay-at-home parents who go out to the workforce have. You may not be working on spreadsheets with your kids. Maybe you are if you're tutoring them, but maybe not working on certain, but you're certainly working on multitasking, negotiation, patience, all those things. So thank you for sharing that with us. Really good to have your background.
So you're welcome. I joke actually, Eric, you mentioned obviously you have a 3-year-old that, if you can negotiate with a toddler, there's no one on this planet you can't take on. So take that conviction to your next boardroom meeting or interview. So I say that a lot to my, the women and minorities that I serve. So
absolutely. And, I'll say that, like, on that point, I want to keep focused on you, but I can't resist saying that I'm pretty good negotiating. That's what I do with, plaintiffs' counsel and litigation, employment defense, or negotiating with, different clients. But mediation, when it comes to my 3-year-old, especially when he was 2, at that really toddler, like razor focus on what he wants age, and even now at 3, he wins every time. I can't negotiate. I just he just wears you down in a wonderful, loving way until, okay, Nathan, so very good point. And we've been up to our first commercial break in about a minute. I'm about to take it now so we don't get in the middle of a new topic and have to break. So I'll just, when we come back though, I'll be asking Rita, Dr. Kakati-Shah, about some unique challenges that women face when re-entering the workplace, and how companies may have stepped up their recent hiring and how some have not. So stick around. You're listening to Employment Law Today and watching the show as well. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. Our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, founder of UMA. On Talk Radio NYC, we'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. Our guest tonight on Talk Radio NYC is Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, CEO and founder of UMA, and diversity and inclusion expert and author, and really just multi-talented, multifaceted guest with us tonight. So Rita, again, really great to have you on the show. I'm glad you're here tonight with us.
Thanks for having me again, Eric. It's been a great show so far.
Sure, and we'll keep getting better. Getting into the meat of our topic about empowering women in the workforce, my question is, what are some unique challenges that women face when re-entering the workplace after raising children? And then the second part of that question is, what detrimental impact do these challenges, obstacles present for both the employer and the employee?
Yes, a couple of things there. It's a great question. And, it's not one size fits all. Everybody has their own unique experience, but generally what we've seen that one of the first things is confidence. When you have been away from any situation, and this is why at UMA, we don't just say we serve women and minorities, because generally anybody from a minority background has felt some level of sort of self-doubt or losing confidence at some point, depending on the situation they're in. So part of that is sort of, where you have lost that confidence because you have to build yourself back up again. And then, hey, if the company made it easier, then it would be a bit of a cyclical kind of process, but it's not always the case. So confidence is one thing where, you just have to believe in yourself. So what we do at UMA is we really, really try to focus on that inner belief, that strength, building up the skills and tools, which you already have. We're not actually doing anything that you don't already have. It's just sort of rekindling those sort of memories, those spirits, that passion, that fire, to really bring out your best so that when you go to the next job interview or that meeting or that coffee with somebody you're just sort of exploring in terms of the next world, you are really out there and giving your best. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is that, notice with a lot of people when they've taken that time off, and this happens with, stay-at-home dads as well. It's not just accumulated to women, but more so women as well, is that you have that natural bond with your children. And naturally, when you go back first to work, you're going from literally being with your kids full time to then a full-time job. You naturally there is no balance in between. So one thing I like to tell companies is that if it's a full-time role that you are, and that the employees actually agree to go back to, then make sure there is some sort of a general sort of ramping up process to gradually get them back used to the hours and also that balance. Trial things out at home, trial things out here so that you can actually get back into it. Because what you don't want is a situation where everybody, both parties sort of looking over their shoulder or checking phones or checking this because there's that level that isn't quite there. So you want to, with anything, when you, any new thing that you do in the workforce, you phase it in. It's the same thing, phase this in as well. So then that's one point. The other part is a lot of folks, a lot of parents, when they do want to go back, they don't want their previous job again. That's something they've been there, done that. They now want to find more of a balanced lifestyle. And quite often they intentionally pick more fluid hours, more flexibility, some sort of a hybrid work environment as well. So here's the thing, some companies have got with the program and COVID actually helped with that when everybody was forced to work from home. Other companies haven't. And those that haven't have more so seen that they are losing more of this talent pool. There were suddenly folks coming in, now they're not. So it's a little bit of a situation where it's, follow the hints out there and see what's going on. But there's a lot out there that companies could be doing to better compromise and form a relationship with the employee coming back.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rita. I mean, what I hear you saying about some of the unique challenges women face coming back to the workforce, I definitely, and you mentioned, to your point, minorities, people in minority class, well, not just women, but also anyone that's, say, that's historically overlooked or not brought to the table. I hear the confidence challenge, right? Perhaps the crisis of confidence, the loss of confidence. I imagine that must manifest as, like, I've been out of the workforce for a long time. Can I still do this? Do I know what I'm doing? Or does my employer believe in me? So I hear that challenge. And of course, you mentioned other obstacles, including, that the missing of one's children as a mother, and arguably a stay-at-home dad too, but keeping the focus on women. And that's our topic tonight. A mom who's home with her child or children or kids, and then goes back to work full time. I hear you saying there's a challenge there. So it needs to be sort of ramped up, right? Gradually. It needs to have some kind of a stepping into the role. And also just the idea of, building up confidence. So I hear that challenge women face. And I also heard in your answer a little bit about the detrimental impact that these obstacles can have for the employer as well, which has to do with loss of the talent pool, if they're not accommodating and flexible. And I think we're seeing that a lot, post-pandemic with the Great Resignation, with quiet quitting, with the Great Reshuffle, whatever you want to call it, where people who are not getting their life balance, their work-life balance needs met by their employers are phoning it in or looking elsewhere. So good to hear that from you, to hear that your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of it is just, a matter of trying to kind of sit down and figure it out. Because I mean, if you look at the pandemic that we just come through, and the McKinsey study quoted quite a lot, where it kind of showed that 1 in 4 women, men as well, but more so women, were leaving the workforce while working from home. So actually, you put the foot on the other shoe and think, what's actually kind of going on here? And the reason for that is actually the breakdown of responsibilities and the imbalance, not just, we look at the workplace a lot, but also there's imbalances going on at home as well. So it's not just a matter of saying that, okay, great, we're going to make everyone hybrid again or have more flexibility and everything is all well. That's not the case. It's a situation where there is a compromise, not just in the workplace, but there has to be some sort of a balance at home as well. Communication is at the center of all of this. You've got to communicate not just with your boss, but communicate with your partner and whoever is your support network and family at home, because this is all part of it. How you communicate that. How do you get tasks done? Are you splitting them up equally? Are you trying to take it on board yourself? Are you too much of a perfectionist at home? A lot of my clients, women say this, that actually we are. There's something I like to bring up actually, Eric, because in the workforce, women bring up the term a lot of one of the reasons they lose that confidence is when they go to a board meeting or they go to a team meeting, they talk about their idea and they use the term mansplaining a lot, right? We just get mansplained to, so we just give up after a while. And for those that don't know, it's where somebody's given a thought. Typically a male comes along, paraphrases it, and then seems to take credit for that idea. So I was actually chatting to some men the other day at at a party about a similar concept and just about sort of doing household activities. And they said, well, we don't want to be women-splained to. And I was like, that's interesting you said that. What do you mean by that? And I said, well, it's a little bit of the reverse in the sense that, we also have to, similarly in the workplace, how everybody has to, no matter what their background, think, okay, we have a new folks coming into the workforce. We've got to sort of balance this out and let everyone do it in their own style. Similarly, home, wherever your workplace is, you've also got to share a little bit more as well without sort of, let things go as well. So I talk about a lot of having balance. And the reason I talk about gender equality is because it's not one gender over another. It's everybody needs to work together for this to happen. Men, women, however you identify, workplace and home and society, everything needs to work together. This is a communication by all segments of society here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's really good. Those are some good points, Uma. Rita from Uma. Some great points. One about the work-life home balance at this transition for women coming back to the workforce and for companies, bringing them back. There needs to be that balance in how they talk to their families, their support group, their support network, rather, right? Their home and their work. That's more than just a simple fix of, you're hybrid twice a week, you come in 3 days a week or something, or vice versa. But also the idea of gender equality and gender equity, right? Because I've heard the difference between, equity and equality. Sometimes equality, people think, well, okay, this policy is exactly equal for let's say this white man and black woman, but that might not be equitable if the policy has a disparate impact on, let's say, women. So if you're in a field, let's say, that traditionally hired men and they go by seniority in raises, they say, listen, this is very equal. You both had, how many years you have working, that's what you get in terms of your raise. But if the company historically didn't promote or hire women, then it's not equity, right? So sometimes equity involves a difference between like having the identical equal terms. But your point also just about, like the fact that there needs to be like a recognition in the workforce of the need for, equality and for a place at the table for women. I think it's very important that you kind of bring that up,
Yeah, yeah, and to your point, actually, Eric, when you talk about pay rises and things and equity versus equality,
Yeah.
This is something that comes up a lot. Like, how do you ask for those pay rises? What do you do in that sort of situation? If you are having been equality, you say, well, everybody can go to their next 360-degree review meeting and they can ask. We've been equal. We're letting everyone do that. Do you have any other questions? What would you like to do? Are you happy with this? That's being kind of equal in that sense. But what research shows is that women are less likely to do that. Our personalities are more refrained. We have more of a kind of, we don't ask for money for that as often. We kind of feel we're kind of grateful for where we are, and we kind of feel like we don't want to infringe upon somebody else. So it's something not as easily done. The equity piece there would say, okay, well, give women more of an opportunity to make them more feel comfortable about asking, phrase it differently, ask about, okay, these are the bands that we are thinking of this year, what would you be thinking of, or have you given some thought, or at your next meeting coming up, this is something we would like you to talk about, have a little think about it, and that could be something to work on with them. So that's where the equity piece steps in as well. So it's almost like the outcome at the end is the same, but you might have different levels of facilitation to get there.
Right. It's an interesting point, Rita. And to your point also, you mentioned how this is not a case of putting one gender above the other, whether it's women above men or men above women. I think it's an important point too. I think that a lot of times, I see this with my clients with companies where I'm going through the employment labor laws, what's required, and different compliance issues. And I'll encourage them to have the training on diversity and inclusion. And some really believe that DEI initiatives mean that something's being taken away from the employer and given to the employees, at the employer's expense, right? Or being taken away from the male employee and given to the female at the male employee's expense. But in fact, it's not the type of situation. This is not, like a situation where there's two sides of the pizza and you're giving them both to some person. It's more that when one benefits from DEI, when the employee benefits as well. The employer gets the benefit of that person's, extra morale, and they're sticking around and they're full, work the full capacity. So I think it's important. I think a lot of times, companies kind of bristle at the idea of, oh, we're being asked to do this diversity and inclusion, initiative. There goes our fill in the blank, profit, whatever. And in fact, I think it's a win-win. And I think that's something that, part of what we're trying to talk about today in our show.
Yes. So I'd love to discuss that more, actually, because that is something that is 100%, you've hit the nail on the head there, where a lot of people, it can be divisive if it's not communicated properly, to your point.
Absolutely, Rita, absolutely. So we are at our next commercial break just about now. So I think it's a nice breaking point. We can come back, and when the next half of the show, I'll be asking Rita about some proactive steps that companies can take to provide opportunities to women and working moms in terms of promotions, new jobs. We'll talk more about hiring criteria being reevaluated, and lastly about Rita's company, UMA. So folks, you're listening to and watching Employment Law Today on Talk Radio NYC. I'm still your host, Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney here in New York City. Our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, a founder of UMA. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic.
Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauver. Our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah, founder of UMA, Diversity and Inclusion DEI Specialist, author, speaker, and guest on our show tonight. So we're talking about empowering women in the workforce and UMA, which is Rita's company and what they do. And, Rita, I think we have some great points we've covered so far. And I want to ask you a little bit more about companies, like what you've seen in terms of like which companies do you think have recently stepped up in their hiring and training initiatives towards hiring working mothers or women re-entering the workforce? And have you seen any companies that have dropped the ball in this regard?
It's a great question. I think a great example would be actually going back from, the post-pandemic, during the pandemic, where companies, everyone started working from home or, closed the doors depending on where they were. And then those that went hybrid, stayed hybrid, those that sort of deemed folks come back full-time or no time, which is what folks are using these days as an expression. And you can do it by industry. So there are certain industries that, felt that it's much better to be in the office because of the way it's done. Finance, my first career after I graduated from university is one example where most cases they're actually asking folks that are on some sort of a trading system to come back in to meet their colleagues. And then similarly, you're getting the same fallout that happened before. You're getting, if you look at the statistics, it's much fewer women than men, going back in those cases. But then there's different areas within finance. If you look on balance, you could argue in different areas. So in a way, with anything statistical, you can always sort of, go one way or the other. So I think it depends on the area it is. Similarly with certain areas, such as academia, for example, there's actually quite a good hybrid structure. Right now, I do work quite closely in academia as well. And I see a lot where you're either sort of in person, but you can also work remotely or hybrid as well. And both are very welcomed. And people are just having to be more innovative in how they work, how they conduct meetings, team meetings, short ones, small ones, versus bigger town hall type meetings, and how they do it efficiently and keeping people sort of engaged via an online mechanism. And I think that's been mostly it, really. If you had literally that silver bullet for how you're going to be able to keep everyone engaged from a remote setting, there would be actually less of an issue for wanting to, why people should actually physically have to be in the office. It's about level of engagement. Is it, productivity? Ultimately, from a business perspective, what is that level of productivity? Are they getting the profits they want? And if they think they're getting it from both mechanisms, they're less likely to change. If they think they're not, such as trading, for example, then they're more likely to say, okay, we need to get you back because we've seen a big stark difference in productivity here. And that's ultimately what businesses are doing. So I think it really depends on the industry. And then within that, the level of flexibility. After the pandemic, companies are more likely to see, I would say, the benefits of allowing this hybrid modality. And it's not just women, men and women are like, what, why am I going to commute for 2 hours on a train when actually I can get a lot more done here? I can just log in that bit early because I'm not sitting on a train or whatever it is. So they're actually pushing back too. Similarly, in newer generations that are coming in, they say no as well. We have a big movement now towards mental health, wellness, and sort of saying no to these demands that I came through. I came through in the 2000s where hours were long. Hours are still long in different ways, but there's a lot more balance now. And I think as incoming employers are starting to push back as well, that is also shifting the needle of how internally employers are dealing with this as well.
It's interesting, Rita, because what you're saying, and you just made the point as well that I was thinking when you said it. The talk of the hybrid initiative and work-life balance and reducing the commute and shorter meetings, that definitely can impact, as you mentioned, not just working moms and women returning to the workforce, which is one demographic, but also men, also young people, also men that have children, women that have children, people that are single, whoever the case may be. I think that we're definitely seeing this push towards, work-life balance and also towards productivity in whatever way it can be accomplished. And I think you're right that, there needs to be, I think that actually has an impact on working moms, because if you're home, you can do more with your children and maybe have a home office set up. But I also think it's very much an interesting question. I know personally, I have clients that ask me about, the fully remote versus fully hybrid versus fully in the office. I'm kind of a middle of the road kind of, I try to avoid extremes when I can. And I personally, I tend to enjoy hybrid. I need to anyway, because I need to go to court, need to see certain clients in person. We're back in that zone again. But even if I didn't have to, I think some folks might work better a little bit in the office. They get like a little break from home. They're not constantly, in their own like living room or home office, and they see their coworkers. There's some connection, some collaboration, some community being formed. New workers can connect. But I definitely, to your point though, I think the rigid, must be in the office 5 days a week that I see a few companies sticking to, it seems as if it's almost standing on ceremony, right? Because with the advent of technology and with the flexibility that people are starting to recognize and expect more things to happen via Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft, Google Teams, what have you. I think that there's definitely a lot of room for companies to have hybrids in most situations. Obviously, if you're a restaurant employing your chefs and waiters, there's not much room for hybrid. But but the bookkeeper can certainly come in 3 days a week. So it's interesting. I hear your point about how a general balance for the workplace has a great impact on working moms, and companies that can do that, can impact them in a positive way.
No, absolutely. And you're right, it depends on the industry and as well, like even musicians and taking music lessons, they also switch to hybrid too, and now, or remote, and now back to hybrid again. But also there was so much though that companies could be doing more as well. So I say two things.
Sure.
So if you are the employee,
Mm-hmm.
and you are now at the position sort of at that crossroads of, which company do I go to? Have a look at the sort of what environment they have. If you know you're the sort of person that prefers a certain lifestyle, like you just mentioned, Eric, that you actually like hybrid because that sort of, it suits what your schedule is like anyway. For me as well, I travel a lot, so I'd like to balance it now with working from home when I'm not traveling so much, because it's sort of balance myself, but I also go where my clients need as well. So it really, really depends on that. Sure. So, but it depends on the individual. So because of, I know this lifestyle, I'm less likely to go and find a client that will only literally want me to just sort of work with them only in a certain area and that's it forevermore, because I know my personality, what I like, the impact I can make as well.
Yes.
So similarly, I tell people all the time that as you are looking for opportunities, look for opportunities that suit who you are. Don't try to fit yourself in someone else's box. There are options out there. It sometimes takes time to go and search and do that, but that's the exciting part. This is the time you can actually search. You look for that match. When you interview, don't just let people ask you questions. You ask questions back too. It's a two-way process. It is absolutely a conversation. And similarly with companies as well, there is a lot more they could be doing with employees as well. So for example, if you are in the office and for example, there is a mother coming back or somebody's coming back from some sort of leave or coming back from military service or whatever that background is, and their boss, and this is actually a real life situation where I actually had a manager, one of my clients, come to me and said, look, Rita, I need your help. I need Uma's help here because, I did everything I could. This person was returning to the workforce. She'd been away for a little while. I did everything I could. I let her leave at like 3:30 every day or 3 o'clock every day so she could go pick up her kids. And I had 2 people leave. What's going on? So one thing, and I talk about this in my book, I talk about is the decency quotient. So one thing that companies can do more, leaders can do more, is exercise that decency quotient. The DQ, I like to say, is the genuine desire to do right by others. So in this case, where that manager helped one employee, right? how does the other employees feel? They feel like, well, why is this person getting special treatment? We hear it in, day out. Why does that person get to leave early? So what I spoke to the managers about, let's find out what is it that these folks do. Do they have hobbies? Do they have things going on? If they don't have a hobby, maybe they should go find one, you know.
Yeah, right.
How do you encourage that? This company, this team is really trying to encourage some sort of a life outside work. They're really into that. So I said, practice what you preach, find out what they're doing. And it might not be every day or whatever, but maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, they take turns. Like this person there plays tennis. Let them go on a Wednesday to go and play tennis or whatever it is. Similarly, what else has some other hobby? If you do that, it shows you are genuinely thinking about others. They're less likely then to have an issue with the other person and will communicate it, talk about it. Because then otherwise the woman that came back, she did not like that either. She was on the verge of leaving too.
Right.
So it made her feel like she was called out, singled. She was embarrassed. That was not the intention, but that's how she felt. She was like, I want to come back and get straight in there. I just need to leave early a couple of times a week. That's it.
Right.
But she was called out feeling that she felt inadequate. So all of the stereotypes about, oh, there goes another mom not doing the work, was totally because of this manager misguiding or miscommunicating his means. So it's just things like that. I say if you exercise that decency quotient and really break it down and thinking about the whole team and what you can do better, things can get a lot better in terms of holistically the whole team working alongside each other well.
I love that. I love that phrase. Well, thank you for that, Rita. I love that phrase that you shared with us tonight. Decency quotient, you know, and what that represents. And also the genuine idea of wanting to genuinely do good for your employees and for your coworkers. And, you know, you're right. I think often companies will say, okay, we're going to be progressive. We'll be, you know, enlightened, right? We're going to give this person, this working mom, right, you know, some kind of an extra special day off, whatnot, or early leave time. But, you know, if they're being singled out, right, to leave, to say at 3 o'clock, 3:30, when everyone else is staying until 6, if they're, let's say, hybrid or in person, or even on Zoom, right, it could lead to resentment and animosity and, you know, jealousy among the coworkers. So, but then rather than saying, okay, we're going to take those rights away from the woman, instead you say we're going to give that extra something to the other employees too. And so even if, you know, if, you know, Bob doesn't have children, but, you know, Bob loves, like, say, I mentioned, you know, like playing tennis, and he can play on a nice day, and well, okay, why not? You know, so Wednesdays, you know, when, you know, Sarah goes to get her 2 kids, you know, and Thursdays, Bob leaves at 4, you know, to play, you know, tennis. So I think that more companies are seeing this, but that's a great, like, really a great observation, you know, an excellent idea to think, you know, like give the extra to everyone so that it doesn't foster resentment in the workplace. And then those stereotypes of, oh, you know, the working moms, you know, like, look what happens when they get into. And meanwhile, the working mom, by the way, you know, I dare say from, you know, what I've seen, my, you know, wife's full-time work and mother, and I'm full-time work and dad, you know, that time off to get the kids is not, you know, an easy downtime break, right? It's not like, you know, coasting. It's not, you know, it's not going to the salon, you know, or the massage or acupuncture or whatever, you know, whatever's relaxing to people. So I think it's really, you know, it's a great, excellent point there, you know. And I think that, you know, just companies need to hear this. And if you're listening tonight, you know, think about what can you do for your workers, you know, this push towards giving more and having more work-life balance, the belief that that pays off in the long run. I think more companies are seeing that. I think when I, you know, I came up in law in the late 90s, early 2000s, and back then at firms, the belief was just, you know, work people into the ground, more hours the better. But I'm seeing that even changing amongst colleagues who are in big firms. So really good to hear that for you. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, thanks. It's something I very much think the more companies that think along that way, that really that DQ, that decency quotient, things can really change. That and just communicating. How do you communicate that better?
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know, change is something that we're looking forward to, and that, you know, we try to promote here on the show by having guests such as yourself. So we're not done yet, folks. We are on our next commercial break. So when we return, I'll be talking more with Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah. We'll talk about UMA, her company. We'll talk about some of the things that our company does, engaging leadership, improving gender diversity, and empowering women in the workforce. So you're listening to and watching Employment Law Today with your host, Eric Sauver, employment law attorney. Our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah on Talk Radio NYC. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. Our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah. We're here live on Talk Radio NYC. And Rita, really just great conversation tonight, talking about empowering women in the workplace, talking about DEI initiatives, talking about the concept of equity and equality, and about balance, work-life balance, what companies are doing correctly, what they're not doing correctly, and just the challenges that working moms face and women in the workforce face in terms of confidence, in terms of missing their children, and in terms of just ramping back up. So it kind of brings me full circle to the intro where I talked about you and your company. I guess my question for you is, if you could tell us a little bit more about UMA, mainly like how do you engage with leadership and improve gender diversity and female empowerment in the workplace?
Great. Well, thank you for asking. And it's been such a pleasure being here today with you, Eric. Sure. So thank you again. So UMA is really a strategic consultancy, I like to think of it, a platform that is an international platform. We don't just work in the US market, headquartered in New York, but we have offices in LA, in London, across different cities in India as well. So, and it really is that a strategic platform that works with multinational companies, it works across academia, it works across policy forums as well. So it's really sort of going in there. I like to sort of think about having that initial conversation with companies about what is actually going on, like almost like a fly on the wall. I would say 7 out of 10 times, Eric, when I get a call, when UMA gets a call about an issue, it's quite widely. We have a DEI issue. Can you do this? Unconscious bias training, or can you do this, or can you do that? And I would say 7 out of 10 times, the actual root cause is something completely different. Mm-hmm. So we try to figure out where is actually the leak coming from, rather than let's just stick a Band-Aid on and just give the training they're asking for. Quite often, yes, we will end up doing that at some points, but we want to get to the root of it first, because the whole point is to come in and actually going back to a couple of questions ago where you mentioned just the purpose of DEI training. Our training, the whole point is to bring people together. Mm-hmm. It's not to break communities apart. It's not to people to think, oh gosh, here we go again. It's really to think about, at the end of the day, everybody, no matter what your background is, needs to feel like this is the place they want to come to work. They're happy about it. They want to feel valued. If you look at statistics, 79% of people, according to Career Builder, when they leave the workforce, they've quoted, 79% have quoted it's because they don't feel valued, right? So you can dangle a paycheck in front of them, a bonus at that point. You can even put a promotion in front of them, but at that point, the damage is done. It's too sour. If somebody, it could be something little, like you go into a manager's office. Fine, they're busy, everyone's busy, but little things like you put your phone down, you stop writing and you look at somebody, or you smile at someone where you say hi, that can make the difference with somebody's experience and their willingness to feel valued in that and wanted to stay in that company. So it's just little things like that that we really, really try to practice ultimately to get out in the training we do. You know, the diversity is making sure all voices feel that, you know, the equity or equality piece, depending on the company, they both use, you know, interchangeably both definitions of either equity or equality there, is literally try to kind of ascertain that balance and making sure everyone is getting to the same ultimate endpoint. And then the inclusion piece is really about that belonging. Do they feel that sense of belonging? Are you including their voice? What is their background? Yes, they may look like they're communicating in a different way, but is that perhaps cultural?
Right.
That way, you know, people can communicate in different ways. You're bringing people in, but are you letting them be them, or are you just trying to put them in a box? So that's ultimately what we try to do with our consulting strategy and training. And then we give out the training according to what we found and the observations. Decency quotient, what we spoke about in the last segment, is something that we very, very strongly adhere to and try to ensure that leadership goes towards that as well. So yeah, that's sort of a nutshell what we like to do at UMA.
Yep, and I love how you said, you know, you have a systemic issue that sometimes clients don't know about. They come to you with X, you know, we need a training, whatnot, we need this, and you can see that they might need more than whatever they think they need. You know, it's like wow, there's so much to say on that, but I want to give you room to talk about your book for a bit, and then of course to share with our audience, you know, at the end of the show, your contact information. But tell us a bit about your book, you know, that you wrote and what it's about.
Sure, well, thank
if you don't mind sharing with us, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I actually got a picture up there. Oh, actually, there's a book up there. I've actually got a copy of it here. It's called The Goddess of Go-Getting, Your Guide to Confidence, Leadership and Workplace Success. Really, the book is about, it's actually almost an extension of UMA. It is everything that UMA does and what we preach. And it's called The Goddess of Go-Getting because actually UMA, the name UMA and why the company was named UMA is after the Hindu goddess Uma. She happens to be a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sibling, she's a wife. So in a way, she depicts all of the many roles that we all have at some point in our lives. But she's full of determination, full of confidence, and just full of just that go-getting attitude. So I call her the goddess of go-getting. So there's a lot of ingredients and elements there that is about that kind of getting out there, but not being, there's a difference between feeling empowered and being entitled, which companies and academic institutions talk about all the time. So the book really delves into that. It's about bringing people together in a way that, you know, talks about different viewpoints, accepting. It talks about how do you communicate with listening being the crux of how to actually communicate better, empathy, listening being at the root of that. And we talk about, you know, this chapter on the rules of the playground, almost like going back to childhood to say, at what point do you get up yourself and rub off your scratches and move on versus go tell the teacher? You know, there are different examples of just sort of, you know, learning social skills. You know, if you have a look at, you know, which kids just get along with others, right? And extrapolate that later on in life. There are some people, no matter their background, they will get along with their colleagues. There's no issue there. And others that they can jump companies and they still don't feel that sense of belonging, right? So it takes two ways there, and there's a lot of coaching and career development elements involved as well, but it's for leadership, it's for everyone. It could be for students, it could be called the goddess of go-getting, so it's very much for women, but it's also for leaders of all backgrounds as well.
Yeah, you know, I can see how like those, you know, concepts and principles that you're talking about can apply not just to women and not just to working moms or women in the workforce, but as you mentioned, you know, to young people starting out, right? You know, to people, let's say, you know, in a minority, you know, class, to people who are coming back to the workforce, or whatever the case may be, all those, you know, issues, the idea of, you know, just of the ambition of empowerment and how that differs in entitlement, and then the decency quotient being thrown in, you know, active listening, all great stuff, you know, really, I think, and the name of your book is the Goddess of Go-Getting, right? So
and actually, to your point, Eric, when we talk about minorities, I start off by redefining what I mean by minority as well, because to your point, this book is for everyone. So everybody at some point has been in a minority situation. You could be a vegetarian and you walk into a barbecue and just somebody's forgotten to put any veggies out. Or you could be that pregnant woman and you walked into an office party and someone just forgot to put water out or some soft drinks. Or, you know, you could be somebody that's not overly religious and you walk into someone that's, you know, you're going into an orthodox function. So at some point, everybody at some point in life has felt that sort of out of place feeling. So because of that, this does speak to everyone. And in that sense, they've all been a minority and know what that feels like. So because of that, it's about when you are in that situation for that moment, you are the one that now has to think, okay, wow, I'm in that position. How do I now kind of fit in rather than expect everyone to kind of come to me? So it's a mixture. It's almost like taking chess principles and game principles and school principles and office politics and everything all in one about how do you together come together. So
Got it. It's, it's excellent to know, Rita, to think about it that way. We've got about a minute and a half left. I want to give you a minute to talk about, how we can find you, your website, your contact information. Got a minute. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So I have my personal website, which is ritakakati-shah.com. My UMA website is beboldbeuma.com. That's BEBOLDBEUMA.com. And you can find me across all social media platforms. So personally, I'm at Rita Kakati-Shah, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on UMA, we're at beboldbeuma. And that's us.
Great. And for those listening on the air who might not be watching, Rita Kakati-Shah, that's Rita, R-I-T-A. Kakati is K-A-K-A-T-I Shah, So we're down to the wrapping up part of the show. And once again, I want to thank you so much. Rita, thank you for being on the show tonight. A pleasure having you on. A pleasure discussing this topic with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Eric.
You're welcome. And for those listening tonight, if you've enjoyed our show, if you like what you hear every week, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your clients to tune in to Employment Law Today here on Talk Radio NYC, Tuesday nights from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm your host, Eric Sauver, an employment law and business law attorney out in New York. And our guest tonight, Dr. Rita Kakati-Shah of UMA. So wishing everyone out there a wonderful, happy week, a good evening, good holiday season. We'll be back next week. And Rita, thank you again so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.